and welcome into this special Eastern Conference wildcard edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, Locked On Pittsburgh Penguins, and Locked On New York Islanders podcast. We are all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making each of our Locked On podcasts your first listen of the day. Let me introduce myself. My name is Armando Velez, the host of Locked On Panthers, and you can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. And very thankful to be doing this crossover edition with the two hosts of Locked On Penguins and Locked On Islanders. Start off with Hunter Hodies of Locked On Penguins. You could follow him at Hunter Hodies. You could follow Gil Martin of Locked On Islanders at Ice Wars NYR VS NYI. And gentlemen, great to be getting together with you two.
Great to be with you too, Armando.
Yeah, it's great to be here, and it's about to get a whole lot more stressful this week.
Oh yeah, because I said it on my Sunday show. I had a previous recording prior to this roundtable that each and every day for the next 4 days, starting on Monday, even when each of our individual teams aren't playing, we all have a game to pay attention to, even when our team isn't in action. Of course, Monday the New York Islanders and the Florida Panthers will be in action while the Penguins are idle, and not all game 82 for each and every team is going to fall on the same day. But let's start off this wild card roundtable edition of the show. Let's start with the team just on the outside looking in the Pittsburgh Penguins, and this is where we turn to you, Hunter. Tell us about the Pittsburgh Penguins season, the ups and downs. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I mean it's been pretty much a roller coaster, to be honest. 80 games, you really haven't been able to figure them out. Team is just average. Honestly, you look at the record: 40, 30, and 10, 40 and 40 overall. That's as mid as you can get, as some of the younger generation people like to say. But you know they shouldn't even really be in this position right now, considering the games they've dropped. A couple games to Gil's Islanders, they probably should have had in the bag. They dropped one in regulation to the Senators. They dropped one to the Canadians. They dropped one to the Red Wings. Heck, if they had just beaten the Islanders in their last game against them, they actually would be 1 point up on the Islanders right now, and they would be in the driver's seat. All they would need to do is win their last two games, and they would be in. But they need help right now. It's just, the top six has carried the load the entire way. Jake Guentzel has 35 goals. Sidney Crosby just hit 1,500 points. Evgeny Malkin has 82 points. Rickard Rakell, Jason Zucker at around 30 goals. Brian Rust has over 20. If you had told me that all that would have happened and they would be on the outside looking in, I would have thought you were crazy. But their special teams have stunk. Their goaltending hasn't been that good. They have a lot of depth players who really aren't doing the job. And it's just been just up and down, Jekyll and Hyde, as I like to call it. They finally, turned it up these last couple of games. They just haven't gotten the help, but they're going to need to get some sort of help this week if they want to get in. One of these two teams is going to have to lose a game while the Penguins have to win out.
You talked a little bit about the goaltending. Tristan Jarry has been injured at times, but sometimes he looks great and sometimes he just doesn't seem to have it. Where is he now, and what has his impact been on this team over the course of the season?
Yeah, I mean, he looks to, I think, have turned a little bit of a corner these last couple of games. I think he's played really well against the Wild. I think he's played really well against the Red Wings. That start against New Jersey, I think everyone was rotten, to be honest. But over this last week and change, I think he's slowly started to get back to the level that we saw from him in the first half of this season. He's definitely battled his numerous injuries this season. One was the groin. I heard the last one was the back, I think, or I'm speculating that he's had a shot in his back, which is making him play a bit better. But he's definitely been turning around, which is nice. It stinks that he was really inconsistent during a good portion of the season because, it's no secret that the Penguins play better in front of him than they do in front of DeSmith. The data backs that up in terms of expected goals against per 60, scoring chances against per 60. They play tighter in front of their starter versus their backup. You figure it would be the other way around, but for some reason they play better in front of they play more tighter in front of their number one. But it's also unfortunate that Smith has had to play more games this season than Jari. Usually that's not the case when you have a starter versus a backup. I think if Jari had been healthy, maybe they're not in this situation, but it's definitely been a big point of contention. It's gotten to a point where you don't really know if he's going to come back next year, but also the free agent market's not that good. They need him to play really well these last 2 games, obviously get some help, but he's done his job these last 2. I said a week and a half ago, you got to ride him until the end. He's your starter. He's giving you decent goaltending, at least right now. You got to continue that these last couple of games. And then especially if they do make the playoffs, he's obviously going to start.
And Hunter, here it's funny because right before doing this roundtable, I was looking up some of the stats, natural stat trick for the Pens, and their goal differential is just a little bit above 0 at +2. But then I look at how statistically average they are in almost every single category. I mean, 49 power play goals at 5-on-4 and 5 shorthanded goals given up. Also, it's the same exact thing flipped around with 5 shorthanded goals for the Penguins and 49 power play goals against for their opposition. So it basically evens out also on the PK as well for the Pittsburgh Penguins in that front. As far as bottom 6 scoring, because that is the key for the Pens. But also there's injuries as well. There's Dmitry Kulikov, there's Nick Bonino, there's Marcus Pettersson as well on the Pittsburgh Penguins. Who is that guy who you believe needs to step up for the Pittsburgh Penguins?
That's a good question, in terms of stepping up. I wish I could say the entire bottom 6 because it's been mostly a tire fire this entire season. I would like to see Mikhail Granlund step up and show a little bit of a pulse. The Penguins paid a 2nd-round pick for him, and I think Ron Hextall got cleaned out pretty badly by David Poile, a guy who's retiring at the end of this season.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why they made that trade. He really hasn't done much since coming over from Nashville. It would be nice to see him step up these final 2 games and, at least look the part of being acquired for a 2nd-round pick. It's funny, we've kind of gone at him all year. Jeff Carter's actually shown a little bit of a pulse these last few games. I guess it's just that time of year during the late stages of the regular season and into the playoffs. That's, I guess, when he plays his best hockey. Maybe he saved it for the end. But as a whole, I think it's the bottom 6 in general needs to step up. The top 6 has carried the load all year. I keep saying on my show, if the Penguins are able to squeak in here, I think it's probably one of the greatest accomplishments of this era is getting this very, very flawed roster into the playoffs, because the GM had a very easy job after bringing back the core at very discounted rates, may I add, and just lit salary cap space on fire and went out and got players who really have not fit the mold that well. So, I'm definitely looking at Granlund. I'm looking at the other players in the bottom 6. It'd be nice if Pettersson comes back on Tuesday. I've heard that's when he's targeted to come back on Tuesday against the Blackhawks. He's been their best defensive defenseman all year. You can make an argument that he has been their best overall defenseman this year, even ahead of Chris Letang, who is awesome, of course. But that's what I'm really looking at here, especially if they make the playoffs, because you need depth scoring to win. They've had that in 2009, they had that in 2016, and they had that in 2017. So that's going to need to change in a big way if they're lucky enough to get in here.
It's going to be a tight race, and looking forward to seeing. It should be an exciting week for all 3 of our teams, no question about that. We are going to break down the New York Islanders next in this special 3-way wild card preview. So, but first, we're going to talk a little bit about FanDuel. Grand slams, no-hitters, and double plays are back, and there's no better place to get in on the MLB action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/locked-on, sign up, place your first bet, and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. And baseball season now been going on for a week. Check out the odds for your favorite team on the FanDuel app. So don't miss a chance to get a no-sweat first bet. up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to fanduel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball.
And we are back here on this special roundtable edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers, Locked On Pittsburgh Penguins, and Locked On New York Islanders podcast. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for making all of our podcasts your first listen of the day. Now we turn our attention to Gil Martin and the New York Islanders. So, Gil, the Lou Lamoriello kicked off the trade deadline 40 days, 30, 40 days, somewhere around there before the actual deadline. And of course, that was the chain reaction to every other team making their necessary moves for the trade deadline. Of course, we spoke about in the first segment about Mikhail Granlund, Dmitry Kulikov, and all for Hunter's side of things. But there was the big acquisition in Bo Horvat for the New York Islanders. And of course, signing that long-term deal with them. He said yesterday about how the environment's better than Vancouver. So already parting shots already for his former team. But the biggest question that I have for the New York Islanders is their power play. Since Matthew Barzal has gone down, I was looking at the span since, and the New York Islanders' power play has a 10% conversion rate since he's gone down. What do you think has been the issue with Barzal not being there and being the inability to score?
Well, I mean, first of all, the power play wasn't that great even when Barzal was healthy. And Barzal was the guy who really skated the puck into the zone and set things up. And him not being there is, cutting down their ability to get established in the offensive zone and set up their attack. Now, I've been saying this on my show for most of the season. When you're on the power play, you have to do one of two things. You either have to pass the puck around quickly to try to tire out the penalty killers and find the open man, or you got to move without the puck and make the penalty killers chase you and try to get open. The Islanders don't seem to do either one of those things. So when you add the fact that they're not getting the puck into the zone as cleanly without Barzal, and they're not passing the puck quickly, and they're not moving without the puck, I mean, they're giving up almost as many shorthanded chances as they're creating with their power play right now, and it's a real problem. And if they do make the playoffs, it'll be a really big problem if they can't straighten this out.
Oh, that seems familiar with where the Penguins are with their power play, which is just insane in itself. But, Gil, Ilya Sorokin, he's, I think me and everyone else here in this wonderful city learned who he was very quickly just a couple of years ago when he came onto the scene and just showed everyone why he's one of the best goaltenders in the league. How much has he truly meant to the Islanders this season? Because honestly, Gil, I don't think they would be anywhere close to where they are right now without his level of play. And honestly, he could very well win the Vezina with this form right now.
Yeah, I mean, he without Ilya Sorokin, and this is no disrespect to Semyon Varlamov, who I think is a quality backup and probably could start for a few teams in this league right now, even at this point in his career. But without Ilya Sorokin, the New York Islanders are fighting for a lottery spot. I mean, this is not a great offensive team. They don't have a lot of gifted goal scorers. We know we've already talked about their power play. Sorokin keeps them in games they have no business being in. And then if you can get that magic number, 3 goals or more in one game, you've got a great chance of winning if Ilya Sorokin is playing even halfway decently.
And going back to that span of when Barzal went down, Ilya Sorokin in that span is third in the NHL in wins. And there are 9 goalies in that span who have 10 wins. Ilya Sorokin is second in save percentage during that span, only behind Linus Ullmark. And Linus Ullmark has started less games. Of course, the Boston Bruins just clinched the President's Trophy a few days ago. They just clinched the all-time wins record or right before this recording, and he hasn't been starting as much. They can let their foot off the gas pedal, but it's impressive, really, how Ilya Sorokin is putting this team on his back and carrying them through. But one positive acquisition that I'm seeing, at least from the New York Islanders, is Pierre Engvall for them. I think he's been a little bit of a bright spot. And we spoke last season about how Kyle Palmieri has been a disappointment for the New York Islanders, but in this stretch, I know the depth as far as scoring isn't the best for New York, but Kyle Palmieri has also been stepping up in clutch as well. If you want to elaborate on what they've brought to the table.
Well, it's related, the two of them, because they are on the same line with Brock Nelson, and that line has been the Islanders' most productive since they put it together about 2, maybe 3 weeks ago. Engvall really adds speed, and when they traded Anthony Beauvillier in the Bo Horvat deal, the Islanders lost, probably other than Barzal, their only other speedy forward. So Engvall, he comes in, he adds that speedy element, and he's also not afraid to shoot the puck, which again, the Islanders don't have a lot of shoot first guys. So when you add those two elements together, and there has been good chemistry between Brock Nelson, Kyle Palmieri, and Engvall, I mean, that's been the offensive line that has carried this team, especially since Barzal got hurt, because up until 2 or 3 games ago, Bo Horvat has been invisible offensively. He does other things well, wins faceoffs, provides leadership, etc. But offensively, that line has carried the team. Pierre Engvall is an unrestricted free agent at the end of this season. Lou Lamoriello has to find a way to re-sign him because he really has been quietly a very solid addition to this team.
Yeah, go ahead, Hunter.
No, and I was just speaking of Gil. Just I think I noticed it a few weeks ago. I think a couple Islanders fans that I actually follow on social media pointed out. The Islanders were struggling a little bit. It might have been going into that game against Pittsburgh, that last one where the Penguins blew the 3-1 lead with about 6 minutes left. But since then, I feel like the Islanders, they've gotten back to being that a little annoying, pesky team to play against. We all know where Lane Lambert comes from, the Barry Trotz coaching tree. It looked like they weren't playing that kind of system for a majority of this season. And then all of a sudden, late in the year or the final third of the season, they just flip that switch. And they're just like, oh, we're just going to go back to playing that style of hockey. And, Lord and behold, it's paid some dividends so far. Have you noticed that they've been, I guess, getting to that part of their game and, having – those 2-1, 3-2 games that, they like playing? I know obviously a lot of fans don't like it just because of where the sport is now with offense. But, have you noticed that the Islanders have kind of bored it down a little bit again?
Yeah, no, they've gotten back to basics.
Yeah.
And I think the Barzal injury sort of forced Lane Lambert to say, you know what, we're not winning 4-3 or 6-5. We've got to play the defense first style. Earlier in the season, Lane Lambert tried to have the defensemen step up and take some more chances and get more involved in the attack, and it did cost them. I think that losing Barzal forced them to go back to the older system, and then I think the fact that although he's hurt right now, Alexander Romanov sort of got more comfortable in the Islanders system, played smarter and better in his own zone, and those two factors combined sort of help the team's defense solidify itself and keep it simple, stupid, right? The old KISS system, it's worked for the Islanders over the last few weeks.
Yeah, and of course, Alexander Romanov, a trade with the Montreal Canadiens this past offseason as part of that stay-at-home defenseman. Of course, the New York Islanders re-signing Noah Dobson on that blue line as well as part of their moves or lack thereof during the summer, which the Florida Panthers are in a similar position of not making moves, but not in the same period of time as well. And that's a good opportunity for us to transition over to our third and final segment, where we're going to be discussing the Florida Panthers and the state that they are currently in. We'll be talking about that next on this special wild card Eastern Conference Wildcard edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast and Locked On Penguins and Islanders. Welcome back to this special roundtable edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers, Locked On Florida Panthers, Penguins, and Islanders podcast on this special roundtable edition of the show. And now flipping the script to you guys on and putting me on the floor as far as answering anything you guys have about the Florida Panthers.
Armando, where in the heck did Alex Lyon come from, and why is he doing this at the end of the season?
Funny enough, it all started with their loss against the Ottawa Senators. It's actually before that. Rewind a little bit. It all started with their road win on March 20th in Detroit, where Panthers knew that they only had 2 sets of back-to-backs left. Okay, that win against Detroit put them in the first wildcard spot to begin with. Okay, cool. Everything's okay. You can rest Sergei Bobrovsky for a little bit for that game against Philadelphia, and you'll probably have Alex Lyon start one more. And we were looking ahead and thinking, okay, that second end of a back-to-back in Toronto and Montreal. Panthers lose four straight, go to Ottawa, give up 3 power play goals, and then the very next day, 2 days later, when they go against Toronto, as the month is ending, Alex Lyon is announced as starter, Sergei Bobrovsky's non-COVID illness, and here we are, six games later, 6 wins later for the Panthers. But Alex Lyon did start earlier in the season, towards late January. Actually, one of those games included was against the Pittsburgh Penguins in the 7-6 overtime loss. That was the second of a back-to-back.
Yeah.
Yep, Letang's game winner there. And with just crazy to think that we were just thinking Alex Lyon is only going to start 2 games after March 20th. Nope. Alex Lyon has taken the crease. He as far as the last game against Washington and then one against Columbus, he wasn't really busy around the net. But the Toronto game is where it all started for Alex Lyon as well. And of course, the game against the home game against the Ottawa Senators, where he saved 56 shots, one shy of a franchise record, which was set by Roberto Luongo back in 2002. But that one was in a loss against the Detroit Red Wings back in 2002. But Alex Lyon is the reason why and along with Matthew Tkachuk and Carter Verhaeghe, are the reasons why the Florida Panthers are currently on a 6-game winning streak and holding the first wild card spot. And a little bit about his resume. He won the Calder Cup last year with the Chicago Wolves, and he was just facing against Charlie Lindgren just on Saturday, who was on the other side of that Calder Cup championship with the Springfield Thunderbirds, the affiliate of the St. Louis Blues. So crazy how it's all been full circle just in a whole year of hockey.
You know, the Panthers won the President's Trophy last year, but there were a lot of changes on the roster during the offseason. And they seem to have been inconsistent for most of the season, but now down the stretch, they have gelled. What do you think was the catalyst for this team sort of finally clicking at this late point in the season?
Health. And yeah, they're currently without Sam Bennett at the moment, but the day that the Florida Panthers were somewhat at their healthiest was actually 3 games before the trade deadline when Anthony Duclair came back against the Buffalo Sabres. In that game, there's no Barkov, there's no Bennett. Pick up a big win against the Tampa Bay Lightning on the 28th. Lose against at home against the Nashville Predators, a very close game. But then trade deadline comes, and Bill Zito doesn't make a single move during the trade deadline. But I kind of see it as when you trade for so much the year before, and you don't have a first-round pick till 2026, and you are right there on the bubble, then what? And you don't have a first-round pick, does it make sense to sell? Not necessarily. There's no benefit for the Panthers to tank. Zero benefit for them. So there also isn't worth trading so much draft capital that you don't already have, neither. And actually, the first game that the Panthers were mostly healthy was that home game on March 4th against Pittsburgh, too. So that Alexander Barkov came back in that game. Sam Bennett came back. Anthony Duclair was in the lineup, and look what happens—a 4-1 win for the Panthers at the time. I didn't really think too much of how important that game would have been until now, but we're seeing it. But the Panthers before early February, they did not have a single 3-game winning streak all season. So it was just win, loss, 2 win, 1 win, two losses, 1 win. It was just so up and down. Through 41 games, this team was 18, 19, and 4 through 41 games. And if you're trying to look at the Panthers schedule of when that is, it was January 8th against the Dallas Stars, blown out of the building on the road on January 8th. But a comeback win against the Boston Bruins at home, where Alexander Barkov scores nearly at the buzzer to beat the Bruins right before the All-Star break, was the start of one major turnaround for this Panthers team. And that was an Alex Lyons start too, funny enough, back in January. And then the second biggest win of the season was another Alex Lyons start. The game against Toronto just last Wednesday, or 2 Wednesdays ago almost. But it's just it just happens to do with being healthy at the right time. Sam Bennett, maybe he might come back Monday. Maybe they'll wait until Thursday against Carolina, but he's one step closer to coming back for the Panthers. And the Panthers, their power play has been clicking too. Just in the last 6 games alone, they're scoring at a rate of 34% on the power play, and they're killing 91% of their penalties. They still take a lot of penalties. And I was looking up a stat as far as Paul Maurice's tenure in Winnipeg. The team that has the most penalty infraction minutes throughout 2014 to 2022, funny enough, is the Pittsburgh Penguins. So that's not an indication that's not always an indication of how bad your team is or how well you are at killing penalties. I mean, Pittsburgh has 2 cups in that span, despite taking so many penalties. Tampa Bay takes a lot of penalties too, and they've made 3 straight Eastern Conference appearances. But the Panthers, before that stretch, they were not only going to the box, but they were not keeping pucks out of their own net. And now it's flipped for this team. With this current stretch, they're starting to kill penalties. The Panthers, for the first time in their history, outside of Pavel Bure, have a 40-goal scorer. Alexander Barkov has been struggling with injuries most of his career and hasn't had a 40-goal season. And the Panthers have 2 on their team this year in Matthew Tkachuk and Carter Verhaeghe. And Carter Verhaeghe was for free for the Panthers because the Tampa Bay Lightning didn't give him a qualifying offer. And there's other players that Bill Zito has gotten for free as far as bargain signings of picking up Gus Forsling on waivers, Josh Mahura on waivers as well. That's another one. And, of course, trading for the unicorn that we call Matthew Tkachuk here in South Florida, and it's just been a treat. He's passed his career high in points, and if you saw any of the highlights of Saturday's game against the Washington Capitals, where he scores with a minute left, and the celly that he had, you knew that was big, and that you knew that goal meant a lot for this Panthers team.
Yeah, no, I was, I had both games on just because, the Penguins won yesterday and I got to, see that one firsthand. But, Armando, talk about these final 2 games coming up. I think these were the ones that I think both of our teams have circled, like the Penguins and the Islanders, they've circled, especially the Penguins because they're behind right now. Everyone's circled these 2 coming up, the Leafs and the Hurricanes. How much do they actually have to play for? Toronto, I think, has to play their full team because they don't have any salary cap space to call up players from the Marlies. The Hurricanes, I'm not really sure how much they're going to have to play for. If they lose tomorrow and the Devils win, the Metropolitan Division will still be up for grabs, but it still could be up for grabs by Thursday. How are you feeling, going into these final 2 against 2 of the top teams in the East? Because, the Penguins and Islanders, they end with 2 of the worst teams in the conference / the league, while the Panthers, they're going to, even though they're ahead of the Penguins right now and they're tied with the Islanders, I think if there's one team that's going to really have to earn it this week, I think it's them.
Absolutely, no doubt. And I spoke about it on my Sunday show where the Toronto Maple Leafs gave Cal Yarncrook, Morgan Riley, and TJ Brody rest, but it doesn't mean that they're going to do it all around the lineup. And you made a great point about salary cap space, about the Marlies, which Toronto just signed one of their big prospects in Matthew Nyes from the University of Minnesota. So that's a big name to watch for the Maple Leafs in the future. But they have the toughest schedule of the three. There's no way around it for this Panthers team, and they did beat Toronto on the road a few weeks ago in a environment that's really hard to play, and that was their first win in Toronto in over 3 years, so since before COVID hit. To give you an idea of their last win in Toronto, this one's at home at FLA Live Arena. The last time you hosted the Leafs, you got steamrolled all over in your last matchup. The Florida Panthers playing with a sense of urgency. I don't know about the players, the ones who do dress, how much they're gonna exert as far as energy about preventing an injury or not. We can't tell. We're not the ones getting on the ice and playing, so we don't know. But it's a nervous feeling for the Panthers, and of course for me myself, wanting to see a win. But it's funny because the Panthers do have a clinching scenario on Monday night. Is if the Panthers get a non-shootout win, New York Islanders get a regulation loss, the Panthers will be in a postseason spot no matter what. Because if the Islanders win on Thursday, Panthers in regulation, and the Panthers lose in regulation on Thursday, down to the third tiebreaker for total win on Monday for the Panthers. Magic number is still 3. Paul Maurice spoke about how that the other teams are going to drop games, especially Pittsburgh. I don't expect either of the two games against the two teams who are literally neck and neck for the Connor Bedard and New York. They're going to be facing up against a Washington Capitals team who is likely to address this Saturday against the Panthers. Probably no Alexander Ovechkin, and it might be in the lottery as well. So it is a tall task. For me, I'm not worried about it. I just can't look that far ahead. Yeah, they're fighting for the division. Yeah, they while New Jersey had a chance to on them in the division. So Carolina will still have much, but Thursday against Carolina, I'll put that a little bit on the back burner for now. Fourth and final matchup, you have an opportunity to tie the season series and clinching scenario on Monday night for the Panthers.
It's going to be an exciting final week of the season for all three of these teams, and I'm eager to see how this one ends up playing out. Want to thank everyone for making this special crossover episode your first listen today. Now make your second listen Game to Game NHL. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every contest from across the National Hockey League with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NHL, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Gentlemen, this has been great. Always a pleasure to talk hockey with you. And two of these three teams are going to be in the postseason, most likely. The question is which two, and it should be a great week for fans of all of these teams to see this go down to what I'm sure is going to be the last game of the season.
Can't wait till then, and hopefully, from my end, it's the team that I.
Yeah, I think we can all say that. Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun. I'll have the double screens going on Monday because the Penguins are off until Tuesday, so that's gonna be a lot of fun to see if Tuesday could be an elimination game for the Penguins potentially.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in and for listening to this special episode of Locked On Panthers, Locked On Penguins, and Locked On Islanders.